all good points, and short of spending another hour, old guys bitching about the kids these days.
Yeah, you've got to comb through this and sort of pull stuff out. You don't want to 2 hours of doing that.
Talking more, yeah.
Talking.
You guys are talking.
We're talking
Oh,
a lot.
really?
A lot of talkers.
I would agree with that.
This podcast is called Erase the Filter.
Erase the filter.
Erase the filter.
Wow, it's been over 2 years since I made one of these. It was March of 2022. That was the last one. It was about hope. It wasn't much of an episode. It was a few minutes about the shit show of a month March of that year was, and then I played my song Hope from the ambient album I made back in 2018. It's called Sea of Self. That was about all I could manage to do at that time. We were all coming off 2 years of the pandemic chaos, the political chaos, the societal chaos. I was coming off of 2 years of a pretty significant creative block, or at least that's what I thought at the time. I didn't realize how significant a creative block the next 2 years would be. In the 2 years prior to March of 2022, I finished the instrumental tracks for 5 additional Here Inside songs. I helped launch a media studio at our co-working space, produced dozens of live streams for our co-working members, including a dozen episodes of a live morning show we did called Cup of J's. I continued producing the Candy Factory 5x5 podcast with my good friend Diggs, and I produced 9 episodes of this podcast, Erase the Filter, including what I consider to be probably my most creative podcast production ever. In March of 2022, it became clear that my mother's mental health, particularly her dementia, had deteriorated to a point where she would no longer be able to live with my father at home. So for the next couple of months that followed, my brother and I got an education on personal care assisted living facilities for elderly people who have dementia. By the middle of May that year, just a couple months later, we had her moved into a facility and began the next phase, mapping out what life for the family and care for her would look like. But this podcast is not about the tragedy that is dementia or my mother's journey of slow, gradual deterioration. She passed away on December 29th, 2023. It was a long, strange trip and one that I wouldn't wish for any family. This podcast is about the creative block during the 24 months that followed March of 2022, a creative block unlike any I've experienced in my life.
What's this green thing?
This is the Libra hieroglyphic
Oh.
for Libra, my sign. Yeah. I didn't know. I got to tell you a story about everything. I was in Turks and Caicos on our little tropical vacation, and Anne had fallen asleep, and I was just bored. And I was flipping through the Instagram, and there was an ad, and I'm a total sucker for Instagram ads. And there was this ad for these cool, hip-looking bracelets, and it was like, one of those fake sales, like, 50% off today or something. I was just I didn't really fall for it. I knew I was being duped, but I was like, okay. So I ordered a few, and they was like, today we're going to throw in a bonus. And they threw this in. And I was wearing it, and I think it was one of my daughters was like, oh, that's your astrology symbol. I was like, what are you talking about? I said, I'm a Libra, so isn't it the scales? But apparently there's, your sign has a symbol, and then your sign also has a hieroglyphic.
Yeah. I know there's like two.
There's like two things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is the other one. This is the non-scale Libra symbol. So I'm like, oh shit, I'm going to wear that proudly then.
Yeah.
This is edited, right?
Yes.
Like I'm going, who's this guy?
Erase the filter.
The creative blocks I've experienced over the last couple of years go like this. I hear something or I see something, I get inspired. I think, oh, that's a great idea. I really need to do something like that. Typically, that leads to some idea of some kind to create something. It might be a song or some stand-up comedy or maybe a video or a story or a social media post or a podcast episode. It's anything, really, anything. I might even think about a particular time to do it. Like I have some free time tonight or tomorrow or maybe this weekend, whenever. Most of the time, I start putting some more thought into the idea. Maybe I map it out a little bit in my head. I think about how to pull it off. And that's when things start spinning out. I feel a sense of dread. I feel tired and drained, like there's no energy. I start to question the idea, like what's the point? Why bother? Who cares? Who's going to pay attention to it anyway? Then it's a simple matter of return on investment. The effort that I'm feeling really isn't worth the result. Of course, in that moment, my brain completely forgets that the real point of exercising creativity is the creative journey, not the result. The audience, first and foremost, is myself. You can't make authentic art while worrying about what anyone else will think of it. None of that stuff matters in the moment. I've already convinced myself that there's really no point in continuing to pursue the idea, and I move on. Sometimes I manage to bypass that little exercise in self-sabotage. Sometimes I actually pick up a guitar or a pen or I press record on some portable recording device. I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing, getting started on something. I might even get as far as recording some tracks. I start planning out some next steps. Then I finish whatever session I'm working on. Life happens. Days go by, weeks go by, months go by, undone. Someday later, I'll think about that unfinished thing, and it will feel as pointless as those other ideas that never even got off the ground because I sabotaged them. So the one thing I can say I've been really good at over the past 2 years is collecting fragments of unfinished ideas. I have an abundance of little things that I've started but never finished. And it's not that these are fully formed ideas that are close to the finish line and just need a little push. These are the beginnings of ideas, starting points, the rough sketches of something that maybe could be. Well, I think there's an important point about making art, and that is audience. I think there are those people who are hermits in the hills and they can, whittle their sticks or do whatever they're doing, and it doesn't matter, right? For some reason, I had a Hobbit or some shit in my head. I don't know. But, it's like somebody could just make these paintings and never show them to anybody, and it's just enough to do that. And I do believe
they do it just to get it out of their head.
Yeah, and I do believe that there is a part of society, a segment of society that is going to just create that stuff for their own sake, and that's fine. But I don't believe that a majority of people who make art are that way. I don't have any science to back that up, but the feeling I get is that a vast majority of artists, whether they be performing artists or fine artists or writers or whatever, are doing it because they are interested in presenting it to an audience.
They're expressing an opinion or expressing ideas, and they do want to express that to other people.
And it has to be similar to the way you receive whatever art it is you're most passionate about. I haven't listened to less music since my creative blocks kicked in. In fact, I've listened to more music. I listen to a ton of music all the time, and that's where all these ideas come from. But me listening to someone else's music, it invokes in me a desire to make music that someone else will listen to. It doesn't invoke in me a feeling of making music for no one to hear.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I hear music that does something to me, moves me in some way. And the most exciting part about the idea of replicating that experience, by replication I mean create something myself, is to present it to an audience and have somebody else feel as interested and excited about my music as I have felt about the music that inspired it. And so perhaps this attempt to come out of this creative block that was obviously caused by this period of my life that was not good, but the struggle to come out of it is probably rooted in this idea that there's an existential crisis about the point. I don't see a path of interest to actually expose this music to an audience. What is a path out of the block, in your opinion?
I think maybe it's just sort of forgetting about social media. And when we're doing things, it's like, try to go back to the reason why you started doing stuff, and approach it with the idea of doing something that sounds good to you. As much as you say, like, hey, I do want other people to listen to this, well, just make it and say, like, I'm going to give this to 20 people.
Right.
I'm going to make it. I'm going to give it to 20 people who I care about.
Yeah, just send it to them.
First. Like, that's first. And I don't know, maybe that's it. I know that's it for me. You know what, though? I've been that way in a lot of the things that I do. I never set out to make anything with the idea, like, it had to please me.
Yeah.
First. And if it pleased other people, great. But frankly, like, I still operate like that.
It's a good lesson, and I've gotten there in the past. You know, I've definitely made music that I love to this day. I've made music that served no other purpose than just to satisfy the creative itch. I've made music where I wasn't so concerned about the distribution of it. But the context of that is that there's always hope that there will be an audience. When there's no hope that there will be an audience, when it's hopeless, when you think of it as no one's ever going to hear this, it will shut you down. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like two things can be true at the same time. You know, you can do it for yourself and also do it knowing or hoping that there will be an audience that will hear it. Those things can be true together. The one thing about creative blocks that I feel like I know from experience is that sometimes you have to force yourself to do things. Anything, really. Even when you don't feel like it or you think that anything you do is shit. You have to do things to make progress. Usually, not always, but usually doing something leads to more things. The inspiration starts to creep in. To be real, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm literally just writing with a pencil and paper to start the process of getting back into this podcast. It's great to be back in the saddle. I want to thank my friend, artist, longtime collaborator, Dave Bellard, for his insight on creative blocks. And of course, my friend Diggs, who tolerates all of my stories, especially those about falling for Instagram ads. This is Jason Mundock. Thanks for listening to Erase the Filter. Show notes can be found at erasethefilter.com. And if you have feedback about the show, feel free to email me at jmundok, jmundok, @gmail.com. And always remember,
Open your mind.
Be yourself.
erase the filter.